All right, thanks, Josh, and good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Great to see all of you, and thank you, AFT, for organizing this important webinar. Despite how sobering Bruce's talk was, it's important to know what's coming, and I think his references, to what we could learn from the Great Recession of 2008 are real important. But as he said, I think we can expect this will even be worse. So I want to start by posing a couple questions to Bruce that maybe he can come back to later. And then I want to make a few comments that build on Josh's last points about messaging. Uh, Bruce, first of all, I was encouraged, but I'd like more elaboration on that California taxation plan that you said Sonny and some others are working on. We know in California for a while we've been trying to change the tax code to undo the damaging effects of Prop 13. And I'm just wanting to hear more about what that legislation looks like, what are its chances, and not only of passing in California, but of doing something like that in other states. California has been making a lot of progress in school funding over the last several years, with a real equity focus on the school funding. And obviously this is going to make that much more difficult. But the big obstacle for us in California has been the tax code and the legacy of Prop 13. So I'd like to hear more about that. Secondly, I'm concerned that if federal money does come to the states, are there any things that could be done to ensure equitable allocation of funds to school districts? Mindful of what you said about the ways in which high poverty districts were impacted, and I got the short end of the allocations after 2008. What do we do to try to prevent that, or do you have any thoughts about that? And at what point do we have to work at the federal level or the state levels to ensure some equity in the allocation of these funds? I was wondering also about Race to the Top. I know that Race to the Top came with many what would I say, measures that were negative in terms of the impact, and actually made problems worse for a lot of schools when it called for removing principals when there were none to replace them and getting rid of teachers. At the same time, it brought money to states. And I don't know if you could comment on that particularly, what we could learn from that bailout, Bruce, that might be helpful in thinking about hopefully what we'll see as future bailouts. So the rest of my comments I want to make about how do we communicate with the public about this period and what role schools play. And here I think AFT could play a real critical role in the message. We already see in many parts of the country, school districts are now the food distribution centers. They're better positioned to make sure that families are getting fed during this time when many families are not working and don't have income. And that is serves as a reminder that schools are a critical part of the social safety net in this country, and not just for children. Right now, they're also serving many families and others. In LA, anybody who needs food gets food, no questions asked, which I think makes sense. That to me should be part of the message that schools are critical to the social safety net for children. And without it, there are a lot of kids whose basic needs will go unmet. Related to that, this is an economic argument that's also become obvious. It is impossible to restart the economy without schools functioning. Parents will simply have no place to send their children and won't be able to work if their children are unsupervised. And so here I think we've got to work with the chambers of commerce. We've got to work with the business sector to get that message out. You cannot restart the economy without making sure that schools are viable. They go together. And that I think is clear to many people because we have so many workers, including many of our health workers, who can't do their jobs if their kids are not cared for. So those arguments go together. I think we also have to use this as an opportunity to raise the issue of equity and access to the internet. It is devastating for lots of kids and families across the country, but especially in rural areas, but in many urban areas as well, that don't have access to the internet. We should be treating access to the internet the way we treat access to water and to light and to other essential utilities. And we've got to make this point real clear and argue. There are towns in urban areas in LA, for example, places like Compton and Watts, where over half the kids have no access and therefore will not be learning during this period. So I think it's important to raise this issue of the digital divide and the way it exacerbates the opportunity to learn. Now, this is a sensitivity, but I think we've got to raise it. I think AFT, it would be wise to kind of be a leader and say, what should children be entitled to with respect to learning during this period? It is very uneven. In some places, we're seeing kids getting overloaded with worksheets and the like. We're seeing teachers being expected to work long hours while they are working from home, many of whom have children of their own. On the other hand, we're also seeing kids who are getting very little, no more than an hour or two of instruction in a week. And the problem with that is that when we expect parents to speak up for schools, we want parents to say that during the pandemic, they got services, they got their children were able to plug in and continue learning even from home. And so I think if we could spell out what are reasonable expectations during this period, especially if we end up in quarantine again, what should we expect from schools in the way of support for kids during such periods and when distance learning is necessary? Finally, I think that this is, again, a larger point about the role of public education in the country. But we've got to make the point that just as the police and fire departments and our healthcare system is vital to the functioning of our society, so are our schools. Our schools, we cannot see this as an add-on, as something we'll do if the money's there. It is just essential to the operation. And we've got to make that point as clear as possible. And we've got to find allies in making that point from other sectors. And so that we can, I think it's going to be hard to get through with the federal government, but I think that there are allies even in the Republican Party who would agree that you can't really operate society without the support of schools. So those are my comments, and look forward to hearing more.